Hi, I'm Brandon Macdonald, CEO of Fireweed Zinc. I apologize I couldn't be there with you today. I wanted to come. I had my flights booked, I had my hotel booked, but of course, as luck would have it, after 6+ months of no business travel, I caught COVID on the eve of coming out. And although I feel perfectly fine, I'm unable to get a negative test, so I can't fly to the US. Nonetheless, I've recorded this presentation and I hope you enjoy it. And really, what I want to talk to you today about, after I go through the obligatory cautionary statements, um, is to touch base on why you should be looking at base metals and zinc in particular. What the story of zinc is, and why specifically it's interesting. Um, why our project is a standout amongst global undeveloped zinc projects. Why groups like Tech have taken notice of our project and invested in us, and what we've accomplished recently and what we intend to accomplish in the next year or so. And look, to touch broadly on this is probably not news for a lot of you, maybe for some of the rest of you who perhaps don't do a lot of investing in the metal space. Zinc is fundamentally used for galvanizing. There's, alloys, brass, bronze, some chemicals, an emerging use in fertilizers, and also a potential use case in energy storage with zinc bromide or zinc air batteries. But really, the demand side is dominated by galvanization. When we think galvanization, we think big buildings, steel, girders, etc. We think bridges. We also have to think cars. Automobile frames. Most automobiles are still steel framed and still galvanized steel frames. And there's an emerging case in renewables, particularly in wind farms, both onshore and extremely offshore, where there's a particular need to protect from rust. There's a very high degree of zinc usage in those technologies. And so, what specifically about that is interesting right now? Well, appropriate to my situation, as a result of COVID, governments looked for stimulus, and there was the usual monetary responses early, which I'm sure we'll get lots of talk and chatter around it at this conference. But there's also a fiscal response, and when you're a government and you say, look, I want to stimulate the economy and I need short-term stimulus, so I need something to happen right now, and I want ideally some long-term benefit to come with this as well. And if possible, I would like to spend $1 trillion or more. There's not really any place you can do that except infrastructure. The USA just passed that $1 trillion infrastructure bill. China, within the last 3 weeks, announced 2.3 trillion for infrastructure. And infrastructure means steel. Steel means galvanization. Galvanization means zinc. And I've said this repeatedly, and I'll say it again. If you're a infrastructure bull, whether that's just because China continues to grow, India continues to modernize, the USA continues to look to refresh, aging infrastructure. If you're an infrastructure bull for all those reasons, and then you add on top this stimulus as a result of COVID, well, then you're a zinc bull. And what's interesting about zinc is not just that it's particularly uniquely affected by the stimulus, but that also the supply side is dominated by Chinese mines. Now, demand side, for the last 2 decades, demand side in base metals has been absolutely dominated by China. We know they have a voracious appetite for base metals as they've been building out their economy. But generally, look at copper, 8%, 9% of global mine supply comes from China, so they are huge net importers. Nickel, 4%, comes from China. They're not a particularly big player in nickel production. Lithium, 14% comes from China, reasonable amount, but they're still not a big player in global production. Yet zinc, 33% of mine supply comes from China, and they're still a net importer. So when you consider emerging resource nationalism occurring right now, and also the need to restock and perhaps shift from just in time consumption of metals to just in case stockpiling of metals, strategic reserves of metals. You're competing, the West is competing with China, not just because they're net importers, but because they're certainly not selling anything that they produce domestically, externally. So this makes zinc one of the major base metals, well, the major base metal that is uniquely affected by current geopolitical tensions. So, the headline of my presentation, where is your metal coming from? You want to, great. So Biden and his crew want to spend $1 billion or $1 trillion, should I say, on infrastructure. Where are they going to get the zinc for that? And you have to consider what are the Western potential supplies of zinc, particularly projects of scale, that match what Fireweed has, and there's not a lot. And so, look, that's the preamble. Now let's discuss Fireweed, and this is the obligatory intro slide, and I want to touch on that. We have a very well-controlled share structure. This is a bit outdated. We just closed a financing. Tech has moved up to 9%. Ibera Capital, an Australian PE fund run by a group who are ex-corporate development within majors, Fortescue and BHP. Rio Tinto. They they own 11% now. So this is this is a major endorsement, having those two groups invest money in this. We have a strong board. John Robbins, our chairman, has done this before. Was part of the team that just sold Great Bear for 1.8 billion. Was part of the team that sold Kaminak for 500 million in Yukon. So we're well familiar with building out these projects and engaging in M&A for a profitable exit for shareholders. The project itself, so our flagship and currently only project, the McMillan Pass project, located in eastern Yukon Territory, Canada. Yukon, famous for gold. What you probably don't know is that Yukon has sold more dollar value of zinc than they have gold. This is largely driven by the fact that what used to be the largest zinc mine in the world, the mine in Faro, was a huge exporter of zinc from Yukon. So, we benefit, despite being relatively rugged, remote country, we benefit from road access, which gives us a direct line to both Railhead in northern British Columbia and a deep sea port in Alaska to send concentrate potentially to Asia, whether that's, Japan, Korea, or China. In 2018, we launched the company in 2017. In 2018, we put out a resource and a preliminary economic assessment. This is critical. You're thinking 2018, geez, Brian, that seems like a little bit of time ago. You're right, it is. And what I want to do is provide this for a snapshot, because what I want to talk about is what's happened since then. So in 2018, we put out a resource of about 11.2 million tons indicated, 39.5 million tons inferred, at around 10% zinc equivalent. This is a very, very large project on the basis of those numbers. The preliminary economic assessment envisaged sort of an after-tax IRR of 24%, an after-tax NPV around the 450 million Canadian mark, long multi-cycle mine life, which is critical for these projects. But so much has happened since then. This was on a small subset of the project. We've done a lot of additional engineering work then. We've got a large $71 million commitment from the Canadian government to improve the access roads to our project, which a lot of which we were previously assuming was our cost in our 2018 PEA. And we have new zones like the boundary zone, which I'll discuss, which were not included. Not only were they not included in the 2018 resource update, we didn't even own them in 2018. So, what does that mean? What are we aiming for here? In 2018, that same year, around mid-year, Arizona Mining was bought by South 32 for $2.1 billion. This was a large zinc project in Arizona. The resource at that point in time in 2018, shown on this chart here, well, it's around 2.5, 3 times what we had in 2018. But we've narrowed that gap a lot, and we'll continue to narrow that gap. And we're a company that's now worth about 60 million Canadian. So you compare what their exit was versus where we are now, and you look at the fact that that was a company that went from 20 cents to $6 in the last 2.5 years, and you understand that as the market wakes up to the big giants of the base metal worlds, and as the competitive tension starts to heat up, these projects transact for very large dollar values. So how do we close that gap to the scale that Arizona Mining had at their Taylor Hermosa project? Well, we originally bought the Tom and Jason deposits, which are in the southeast. You can see on this map here. We bought these off Hud Bay. We expanded what was then a 54 square kilometer land package to 940 square kilometers. This was based on a theory that these deposits formed along a major fault, major crustal structure that ran through here. That this crustal structure, this fault where it intersected other faults, was a kind of locus for fluid flow and produced these styles of deposits. So we traced that fault to the sort of west-northwest, along what we call the fertile corridor there. Did a bunch of deals with various groups to acquire that land. And yeah, made some additional discoveries. And that's been critical to the story, is that this thesis that this was a district is correct, that we now have a repeatable, method of finding these deposits. And then what we have is not, a one-off or a two-off as it was, but is going to be a sizable district with numerous deposits. And that's to tell people, or I should say, don't sleep on Tom and Jason. I don't want to get into this. We actually have a town hall next week. You can sign up for online, where we're going to go into in detail the exploration success we've had at Tom and Jason and Boundary, and what we're looking forward to in the future. But I just want to kind of touch on this, that when we did that 11.2 million tons indicated and 39.5 million tons inferred at Tom and Jason combined, we've done so much since then. We've delineated the Tom North zone. We've improved the Tom West zone. We hit a major high grade step out at the Tom East zone. Major high grade, 16.5 meters, 21% zinc, 13.5% lead, 240 grams silver. This is bonanza grade intersection, right? So that sat outside the 2018 resource because we hadn't even drilled it then. So these are all things that are going to impact the next study. And at Jason, the two zones of Jason and Jason Main, always interpreted to be opposite sides of a syncline. We have fault offsets there that were not in the 2018 resource that we hope to include in the resource that we will release next year. So Tom and Jason, fantastic deposits, and I'm going to talk more about Boundary Zone, but do not sleep on Tom and Jason. These are very, very special deposits. What was Boundary Zone? And then if you think back to that map I showed, that's about 15 kilometers west of Jason, which is in itself about 4 kilometers west of Tom. This was this is a big zone. We're hitting these super broad intersections there, 230 meters of 4.5% zinc. Is that necessarily eye-catching grade? No. Is 230 meters a hell of an intersection for a zinc deposit? Yes, absolutely. And within that 230 meters, we see things like 6.5 meters of 43.5% zinc, in a sub-interval within there, a meter of 62% zinc, which is pure sphalerite, which is the zinc sulfide mineral. So when Boundary Zone gets high grade, it gets very, very high grade, but it's all contained within this nice, broad, mineralized halo that looks like it has immense potential for open pit. So we follow that sort of rediscovery, because there was some historical drilling here in 2019 with drilling in 2020 and 2021, and have confirmed just the scale and opportunity at Boundary Zone. And the mineralization there always looked a bit different than Tom and Jason. I don't want to get too much into the geology here, because I doubt much of the audience are geologists, but suffice to say it looked different, and we were a little bit confused or a little bit unsure about what the genesis of that was versus what we saw at Tom and Jason. And what we found is that the mineralization at the main part of Boundary Zone looks a lot like the lower part of the system at Red Dog. And there at Red Dog, this vein style mineralization feeds into a barite horizon, which acts as a chemical trap, which is to say it's reactive with the fluids. That produces the very, very high grade massive sulfide mineralization that's so characteristic of Red Dog. So with that as an analog, we thought that, well, look, if Boundary Zone was plumbed into a barite horizon, and there are barite horizons in that vicinity, maybe you get those same reactions and that same replacement of barite with zinc lead sulfides, and maybe we can find a target like that. Uh, so we did a bunch of gravity surveys to test the extension of that. Found a nice anomaly west of boundary zone. Did a bunch of drilling there in 2020 and 2021, and bingo, made our discovery. And discovery is so affirming as a geologist that your crazy theory is correct. And we had this theory that, hey, look, these veins may be plumbed into a barite horizon, and that might produce these massive sulfides. That's exactly what we saw. That a red horizon you see there, that is a massive pyrite sphalerite galena horizon, which seems to have been a barite horizon completely replaced by these metal sulfides. We see another horizon there that looks a little bit more like Tom and Jason in the purple, that we hit these crazy grades of 10.5 meters, 23.5% zinc, 3.4% lead, and almost 3 ounces silver. So this Boundary West discovery, which is a true pure discovery by our team, and total credit to them, just really kind of blew open the opportunity at Boundary. Now, we're hoping to take that and expand more on what do these various mineralized styles mean, what are the extent of these horizons, and we're hoping to take that and build towards a resource next year that incorporates that vein style mineralization at Boundary, which is so pervasive and so broad, those nice discrete massive sulfides at Boundary West, and build towards a global resource next year that will include Tom, Jason, zone, and boundary zone. And including those, we're still not going to get time to drill any of the other numerous targets. I talked about how this is a district, and along this fertile corridor, tracing that major district bounding, major crustal structure, that fault, you get more of these deposits. We have so many targets. We're not going to get to chase them all. We have a wealth of opportunity here. Even Boundary, the initial numbers we'll put out in there are just going to be scratching the surface of the potential. So, how do we create value here? We take that 2018 PEA as a base case, and you think, okay, so that was that big. That's 450 million Canadian. You consider that the government's eliminated a bunch of our capex by agreeing to fund that road. That improves the NPV. You look at the engineering improvements and the resource expansion at Tom and Jason. Each of those substantially improve the NPV. We look at the boundary zone, the maiden resource there, and the integration of that into the mine plan will substantially increase the NPV. And I'm telling you, we're just going to be scratching the surface of boundary zone when we release these numbers. This is the beginning of a long and beautiful relationship with that part of the project and the broader western part of the project, which is going to bear fruit for generations, no doubt. And all of this integrates into a new study that's going to look radically different than that 2018 one. We think, well, what are we targeting here? If I were to have my wish list, if I want to achieve a true tier 1 project, what does tier 1 mean? It's the eye of the beholder, right? Everyone's got a different definition of what tier 1 means. Well, I'd like to see something that's in or around the top 10 production profile of zinc mines across the world. I'd like it to be first or second quartile costs, which is say not a marginal producer. I wanted to have a long multi-cycle mine life. We already know that's possible, so that one I think is a near certainty. Look, if I can squeak this up to approaching $1 billion NPV or getting over that line, that would be absolutely awesome. And that will really, affirm, Fireweed in our Macmillan Pass project's place as the preeminent zinc development project, and certainly the best zinc development project held by a junior by a long shot. So it's a big ask, but we've got a great team, and we've now got almost $20 million in the bank. So we've got a nice, good runway to get out there this summer. Biggest ever drill program, execute on this project, and hopefully deliver what is a true tier 1 project. So that's it for me. Please reach out on my email address there, brandon@fireweedzinc.com, if you have questions, and feel free to Feel free to join our webinar next week if you want to learn more about our exploration. Thank you very much, and hopefully next year I can see you in person. Bye-bye.